friend. Welcome to the Andy Special, a weekly podcast with entrepreneurs who inspire about community, what it means and how they connect with it. I'm your host, Ashley Chonka, and I'm excited to share with you the voices of those who do the everyday work of building community. The story of this podcast begins in August, 10 years ago, when I stepped into Andy's deli to ask about a job. Surrounding me were over 3 decades worth of community markings on all walls. I turned around in wonder at the signed jerseys, letters, Christmas cards, and thank you art from elementary school students. At the counter was the owner himself, Andy Shlon, who greeted me with a warm smile. "Hello, my dear." I had been nervous about making a good first impression. However, as soon as Mr. Andy greeted me, I felt at ease. I couldn't help but smile back and hope that he had an opening. Unfortunately, he didn't have anything available, but he asked me to leave my number anyway. A couple of hours later, I was working on an application at the mall when I received a call. It was Mr. Andy informing me he had a position available after all. I could pick up my uniform and start the next day. The truth was, I had become disheartened with my job search after experiencing the warmth of Mr. Andy's presence. I cheered internally, did a happy dance, and let him know I was on my way. Later, as I was leaving with my uniform, I couldn't help but ask him why he had changed his mind and hired me. He replied simply that I seemed like a hard worker. The next day, after my first classic lunch rush, I sat down with the Andy Special, a roll stuffed with layers of turkey, Swiss, roast beef, and topped with crumbled bacon, warmed until the cheese is melted and served with a heaping side of the deli's decadent special sauce. Tired and hungry, I excitedly dipped the Andy Special. When I took my first bite, I felt myself sink deeper into my chair and let out a satisfied groan. For 5 years, I was lucky enough to be surrounded by the marks of Mr. Andy's influence, to learn from each greeting of, "Hello, my friend," or "Hello, my dear," and to gain a second home. I moved on to other jobs after a couple of years, but I still went to the deli to study and hang out between classes. My former boss and coworkers had become my friends. I asked Mr. Andy once why he decided to open a deli. He told me a story about when he immigrated to the U.S. from Lebanon as a young adult. Sharing meals while enjoying the company of family and friends reminded him of home, and he wanted to create that feeling of home for others, for anyone who stepped into the deli. Mr. Andy made an impact through his ability to provide a comforting experience connected with the simple pleasures in life. Crushed ice to chew on, a handful of bubblegum cheerfully tossed into a to-go bag for an adult, a delicious sauce to dip a sandwich in, and a community to enjoy a good meal and belly laugh with. This podcast is a celebration of that connection with community and the entrepreneurs who build them. Thank you for joining me for this introduction of the Andy Special. Be sure to tune in on Wednesday, July 13th for the first episode. I talk with Winnie Julian, owner of Café Creole and Catering, about learning to cook in Haiti, opening a restaurant in the middle of a pandemic, and the inclusive community at the Trenton Farmers Market. Subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen and head on over to theandyspecial.com to subscribe to Catnip, an accompanying blog with insights from the episodes. The first post is out now and tells the story of Trouble, the deli cat behind the podcast cover art. You can also reach out and show some love for the podcast on Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook at The Andy Special. I'm your host, Ashley Chanka. Until next time, my friend.